at least half of the 651 people who have registered for today's webinar. I think it's about time to get started. So welcome to everybody, and thank you for spending the next 90 minutes with us. We're delighted that you can be here. We're also delighted that our panelists have agreed to join us from some of the most esteemed research areas for assets research in the country, and also practitioners and our own policy unit here at CFED. This is a record crowd, 651 people on an assets webinar, and this is the first in a series of webinars CFED will be producing over the next several months in partnership with NeighborWorks America. We really want to thank them for their support. It's an important series that's really going to be designed to showcase some of the best assets-focused innovators, researchers, and practitioners to help inform your work. Today we're excited to bring you a full 360-degree update, really, on the individual development account research, policies, and practice. The next webinar in this series will be in January, and we'll focus on behavioral economics. NeighborWorks, in addition to thanking them, I also want to make clear that they are not talking directly about policy, and they cannot talk directly about policy, but CFED has done a lot over the years to kind of track and understand all of the aspects of the Assets for Independence Act and the authorizing legislation for the AFI program. And given the proposed 63% cut to AFI funding, there's a real urgency to take action and to understand what can be done to help further support this work and to understand why asset building work is so important. So we're happy to bring that information to you today, and we're looking forward to your questions as well as giving the presentations that we've prepared for all of you today. In terms of housekeeping, just a couple of quick things. The webinar attendees are all muted, so all now 600 or so of you are muted for the duration of the webinar to maintain the sound quality. We are recording this call. And if you have any trouble dialing in, you can listen through your computer by connecting the speakers or a headset to your computer. We're going to take questions and comments, and we've kind of segmented out the Q&A periods after each section of the webinar, so we don't have to wait till the end. But all your questions really do need to be submitted through the question function in the box. So, so you don't have to wait until a presentation's over. You can send those questions at any time. So go ahead and submit questions throughout, and we'll be working on kind of sifting through those and lining them up for the Q&A sessions. And then any questions that we are not able to get to during the webinar will be posted online along with the recording. And then finally, if you have any technical issues during the course of it, please email livemeeting@CFED, and we will be able to help you offline with that portion of it. So again, thank you for spending the next 90 minutes with us. We couldn't be more excited to give you the individual development account update from a research perspective, legislative opportunity perspective, and around innovative practice. We've really got three chunks to the webinar. I'm going to move forward now and introduce our speakers. And so I'm not sure which slide we're on, but if you want to go ahead and move that toward the there we go. Thank you. So the first off, we're going to have Caroline Ratcliffe and Signe Mary McKernan. Both are senior fellows and economists with the Urban Institute. They'll be giving an overview of a lot of the kind of widespread lit review of what do we know about IDAs, what do we know about the way that they work, and you also hear about the upcoming evaluation of the AFI program from them. We'll also hear from Mikhail Grinstein-Weiss, who is the senior researcher on the 10-year follow-up, the fourth wave of the American Dream demonstration research. So given that this is widely a NeighborWorks type of audience, we are focusing somewhat on housing, but there'll be opportunities to talk about some of the other outcomes associated with the IDAs as well. We'll have Q&A after that, and then we'll move into a really fully informative conversation with the federal policy team here at CFED, with Carol Wayman, who's our federal policy director, and with Ina Mesed-Imo, who is our policy associate at CFED, both giving some of the background and some of the specific opportunities that are coming. I'm getting a message that I need to talk louder, so I will try to do that. And then finally, after that Q&A session, we'll also have Betty Tam and Rebecca Barger from NeighborWorks Umpqua talking a little bit both to the relevance of the research and the policy they've just heard about, and also talking about some of their own program and the way that they are engaged both in practice but also in policy and research as a way to make their work more effective. So with that, I'm going to turn it over, invite Caroline and Signa Mary to begin their presentation, and I'll come back around, and then we'll have Lauren Stebbins and myself facilitating questions after each of these segments. So, so Caroline, why don't you give a start?
Based on a literature review that we did here at the Urban Institute, Signa Mary, myself, along with Erica Vedlewski, as well as researchers at the Center for Social Development. You can download this literature review off of our website, and I've given the address there. So the literature provides a broad overview, and much of the literature is not based on AFI IDAs. A lot of it is based on the American Dream Demonstration, which is an IDA pilot program that was implemented between 1999 and 2002. So in the early days of IDAs. And I'll provide broad findings in the literature, but again, a lot of the details are in the literature review. So in terms of overview, there's really two major areas in the literature. The first is the overall effect of IDA program participation, and the second is the effect of specific design features. So we say overall effect of participation, but it's important to keep in mind that while IDAs and the AFI program have a common set of design features, grantees can adjust their programs to meet the needs of their community, so there's no single program. I'm going to talk about three outcome areas: assets and debt, economic outcomes, and then cost-benefit analysis. So just quickly in terms of methodology, some of the studies, particularly the American Dream Demonstration, is experimental analysis with treatment and control group. And there we're really getting at what is the effect of participating in the program on these outcomes. Other studies use quasi-experimental methods or non-experimental methods, and here we're really getting more at associations. How is participating in the program associated or related to these different outcomes? So it's not really cause and effect, and so I'm going to use that terminology throughout. So the next slide provides a summary of the overall effect of IDA participation on assets and debt. So a key question in the asset building field has been, can low-income families save? And the evaluation of IDA programs have shown that low-income families can and do save, and this has been really important. So while these programs have shown that low-income people can save, there is no evidence that IDA participation increases net worth, and what that is total wealth in the first 3 to 4 years. So I want to say a couple things about that. First, it's really hard to measure total wealth and total wealth over time. So it could be a data issue, but also the uses of the IDA funds are for longer-term investments, so we don't expect short-term increases necessarily. So for example, there are lots of costs associated with buying a home, and we expect that going to school has longer-term benefits and not short-term payoff. So the fact that there's no evidence that IDA participation increases total wealth, I would say, is not, in the first few years, is not a valid criticism of the program. IDA participation has been found to increase home ownership rates of renters after 4 years, and that has been found to increase these home ownership rates by 7 to 11 percentage points. IDA participation is associated with increases in business ownership and post-secondary educational advancement. Here the results are a little bit more mixed, but there is some evidence of this positive relationship. So the next slide looks and focuses on the overall effect of IDA participation on economic outcomes. So here, IDA participation is associated with increased employment. Here, the studies show that 3 years after enrollment in the IDA, the likelihood of being employed was higher by 5 percentage points among IDA participants as compared to non-participants. And also that IDA participation is associated with better budgeting and financial planning. In terms of some other economic outcomes, IDA participation is not associated with increased earnings or reduced public assistance benefits. So while while there are some mixed results across these studies that have examined the economic outcomes, they generally do suggest that there are economic benefits to IDA participation beyond savings and assets. The next slide focuses on the costs and benefits of IDAs, and this is really important for sort of moving forward with IDAs. There are very few studies of costs and benefits of IDAs. The existing study research out there looks at the American Dream demonstration that I mentioned earlier. And importantly, it compares program costs to dollars saved. And what it finds is that $1 of net savings costs $3. So this has actually been a criticism of IDAs that they're expensive, that it costs $3 to get people to save $1. So 2 points on that is that this study is comparing program costs to dollars saved, not the overall benefits of the program. And as I alluded to, we do expect longer-term benefits that aren't captured here. And there's lots of civic and psychological benefits that are associated with program participation that aren't captured. And also, this is not a cost-benefit analysis of AFI. And this evaluation, or this cost-benefit analysis, was the first IDA program. It's in the early days, and it really could have changed over time. So moving on to the program design features, the first I want to talk about is financial education. What the literature has shown here is that hours of education received are associated with increased savings and increased deposit frequency. So basically, the literature suggests that 10 to 12 hours of education is optimal, and that after 12 hours of education, there's no increase, no effect. So the participants aren't benefiting after 12 hours of education. One study, for example, found that each hour of financial education up to 10 hours increased monthly savings by a little over $1. So here it was suggesting by going from 1 hour of financial education to 10 hours, increased monthly savings by about $10. And there's been no relationship found between hours of education and asset purchase. The next slide looks at the match rate and the match cap. So the match rate being you save $1 and you get $2 in match savings, and the match cap being the maximum amount of money that can be matched. The literature shows that higher match rates are associated with a greater likelihood of being a saver and staying in the program. So higher match rates entice people into the program. They're more likely to save and stay in the program. But they're not associated with higher amounts of saving. That is reserved for the match cap. That's the last bullet there, that higher match caps are associated with higher savings. And it appears that people are using these match caps as a savings target. Also consistent with this is having higher monthly savings targets have been found to be associated with higher monthly savings. So that's all I'm going to say about the literature, and I'm going to turn it over to Signe-Marie to talk about the next AFI evaluation.
All right. Well, the Administration for Children and Families just started an evaluation of the Assets for Independence program, and the Urban Institute, together with RTI and MEF Associates, is conducting the evaluation. In today's climate of limited resources, it's more important than ever that we're able to show through rigorous evaluation that this program works. So the next slide lays out the research questions for the evaluation, and they include: what is the impact of participation on outcomes, such as savings, asset purchases, and material hardship? And how do specific AFI program design features affect outcomes? The next slide summarizes the importance of this project. This evaluation will be the first experimental evaluation of AFI IDA projects, and it builds on the earlier IDA evaluation research that Caroline just summarized. Next slide. The evaluation will be based on 2 sites, each with a control group of participants who do not receive services, and 2 treatment groups who receive different services. Ideally, the sites will have 1,000 applicants over the course of 12 to 15 months. As part of the evaluation, we'd like to make you aware of an upcoming new and exciting grant opportunity for current or prior AFI grantees who are interested in participating in this random assignment evaluation. We anticipate that a special funding announcement will be released in March and will be open for 90 days. And if you submit an application for this special grant announcement, it will not preclude you from submitting an application for the regular January announcement or other fiscal year 2012 announcements. And then in addition to the AFI grant funds, additional financial incentive payments and online technical assistance or on-site technical assistance will be available to grantees to support their participation in the evaluation. So stay tuned for more information about this special announcement. And if you think you may be interested, please let us know. The next slide gives the participant outcomes that the evaluation will focus on. These include savings patterns. So how often, how much are people saving? Is it through direct deposit? Also, we'll focus on asset purchases, on debt holdings, on employment and earnings, on means-tested benefit receipt, and then also material hardship avoidance. The evaluation will look at material hardship avoidance, for example, because it may be that unmatched withdrawals of IDA deposits help families avoid food, health, or housing security hardship in times of unexpected emergencies. Well, I mentioned that as part of the evaluation, we will measure the effect of different design features, and that might include, for example, a higher match rate. If you have an idea on a design feature that it's important for the field to better understand, please submit that idea to the webinar staff because we're making those kind of decisions and thinking about that now. So thank you. Now I'll turn it back to Ida.
Okay, thanks, Signa-Mary, and thanks, Caroline. I think that this has been a very thoughtful process that a number of people have gone through in the field to think about this next evaluation, and clearly continuing to build the evidence base for why a focused effort on building assets for low-income communities, this kind of work can really help advance the field. So I'm going to turn it over to Mikhail now to talk more about the 10-year impacts of individual development accounts on home ownership. And so Mikhail.
Thank you, Ida. I'm delighted to be here today and share this result of the study. The study has been done, led by UNC, but the other collaborators are Michael Schraden, William Gale, Bill Roy, Michael Schreiner, and Clinton Key. So we're looking on the 10-year impact of IDAs on home ownership. It is the data, as Signa-Mary alluded, a lot of the studies on IDAs are coming from the American Dream demonstration, which was the first large-scale test of IDAs in the US and the only randomized longitudinal experiment until now that we're going to have the AFISH, which is very exciting. The American Dream demonstration experiment was conducted in Tulsa, Oklahoma at KFTC, and it was running between 1998 to 2003. People who were eligible for the experiment had to be individuals who were employed and earning less than 150 of the federal poverty guidelines, so the same requirement of regular IDA participants. We had a random assignment of 1,100 people, 1,103, into treatment and control groups. So treatment group participants were invited to participate in the IDA program, to open an account, to save, to get the financial education, etc. People at the control group needed to abstain from participation in any of the KFTC made savings during the experiment, but could have access to other services at KFTC and individual counseling. The original experiment had 3 waves of interviews. So before random assignment, so at the beginning of when people sign in they are interested to open an IDA account, they were interviewed and then randomly assigned. So that was the wave 1. 18 months later, there was another set of interview, wave 2, and 4 years at the end of the program, we had the wave 3 interview. Next slide. In the experiment, the assets goals that KFTC allows people to use for, including home purchase, home improvement or repair, a business startup, post-secondary education, and retirement accounts. The metric was 2-to-1 for home ownership and 1-to-1 for all other purposes. And the program went for 3 years, so it's quite different from some of the AFI programs today. The program went for only 3 years. There were a cap of 750 per year for 3 years of the savings, so participants could accumulate 6,750 for home purchase and 4,500 for any other qualified users. Next slide, please. The major findings from regarding home ownership from the previous ways were that we found a positive impact on home ownership. Home ownership rate rose rapidly in both groups, but increased 7 percentage points more in treatment groups than in control group for baseline rentals. And treatment group was we found that the way they engage in home ownership was through clearing debt activities. So there was some mediation there. Next slide. So a few years ago, we assembled a new team to conduct a Wave 4 interview and to do a long-term follow-up with this TOLSA IDA program. It was the first, it provided the first long-term evidence of any IDA program or mass saving program for that matter. We follow up with both treatment and control groups 10 years after random assignment and 6 years after most people or people in the treatment have graduated from the program. It was a collaboration between UNC, Center for Social Development, and the Brookings Institute. And the data was collected by RTI International, and we were in the field between August of 2008 to April of 2009, which, as you might recognize, that was we went through the economic crisis, and we made sure that we are interviewing treatment and control group members at the same pace, so we won't end up, talking with treatment group before the crisis and control after, which will be pretty bad. Next slide, please. So I want to share with you some of the results we had from this study. This slide showing you the rate of home ownership during the 10 years, so year-by-year rate of home ownership. And as you can see, the treatment group have a higher rate of increasing in home ownership during the experiment and during when they were in the program. So between 1999 and 2003, we see high increase of home ownership for both groups, but a larger increase for treatment group. And then you can see, and especially there was a big spike at the end of the program between 2002 and 2003, when it seems to be a lot of home purchases being made then. But soon after the program ended, and by 2004, control groups start catching up. And as you can see, between 2004 and the levels are not that great, but it's between 2004 until 2008, control groups basically kind of caught up. Next slide. So this slide showing you the predictable probability of home ownership by the different groups, by the full sample, the rental sample, and the unsubsidized rentals. And as you can see, all of them showing a slightly more higher home ownership probability of being a homeowner at Wave 4, but none of these are statistically different from each other. So for example, if you look on the full sample, if the average responded at baseline and assigned to a control group, we estimate that that person would have 45% probability of owning a home at Wave 4. But if instead it is assigned to a treatment group, we estimated that the probability of home ownership will be 48% at Wave 4. That's for the full sample. We see a little bit higher differences among renters and unsubsidized renters. So for example, for unsubsidized renters, the average treatment group member is probability to be an homeowner at Wave 4 is 46% versus only 35% for a control group member from this group of unsubsidized renters. But still, looking on statistically significant, this doesn't make to call statistically significant in the conventional cut. Next slide, please. We had a reason to believe that this might be different by income, and we did some subgroup analysis looking on baseline income, which means the income that participants sign in when they sign to the program. So we cut the sample by their income at 1998 when they applied to the program, and when we're looking on people above the median income, which is roughly $16,000, we actually find a strong treatment impact on home ownership. So for both the full sample and the random sample, we see a large increase in home ownership and a big difference between treatment and control groups in terms of probability of home ownership. So for example, to the above median income for renters, the probability of becoming for control group members to be a homeowner at wave 4 is 35% versus a 46% probability of for that for renters. Next slide, please. Looking on loan characteristics and loan performances, and this is kind of a quick snapshot because we don't have time to go into the more heavy analysis. We find that 90% of both groups held the fixed rate mortgages, so really just everyone receiving a good mortgages. The average interest rate was about 6.4 in both groups. We find very few cases of serious delinquency, and by serious delinquency I'm talking about 90 days delinquency or foreclosure in either group, so really very, very few cases. But we don't find any statistically significant differences between treatment and control groups on loan characteristics and loan performance. Next slide, please. I want to mention a few quick caveats for generalizing this result. I'm happy to speak more about that at the Q&A time if people have more questions. The key one, of course, everyone who is assigned to this experiment are people who are self-selected and people who are high motivated to save, to become homeowners. So that's always, we have the selection effect when we do this kind of experiment. The housing market in Tulsa during these times when the IDA was happening was a time of very easy home ownership, and especially was true in Tulsa. Using practitioners' name, like talking with Stephen Doe, who is the director of efficacy, said basically everyone who wants to become a homeowner could have become a homeowner. So again, another reason why I'm excited that we will have a new experiment of athletes in different places, in different markets. There were other financial assistance and social support that's available in Tulsa and in CAFDC to control groups as well. We tried to capture some of this in the survey that we have done in ADD4, but we couldn't find major differences by treatment control, but we also didn't have a very gap set of questions to look on what other support control groups might have access to. This data and this analysis that does not control for crossovers, and we do have some level of crossovers, which means people at the control group who end up being receiving an IDA. However, when we apply the Bloom correction, it doesn't change the results very much. And also, I want to mention that this was really a pioneering IDA program. That was among the first IDA program in the country. It ran for only 3 years, lower match rate, quite different from what we have today with AFI. The level of performances and knowledge and financial education was quite different. So again, good reason to do a new experiment after the field is advanced. Next slide, please. So in summary, and just concluding what I've shared with you, we see large increases in home ownership for both groups, the treatment and the control group over the 10-year period. This is quite remarkable given that it also was a time of, housing crisis, not at the beginning, but later on, and economic crisis, but we still see large increase in home ownership throughout the time. Both groups have received good mortgages products. we don't find statistically significant impact on home ownership at wave 4. Control group members were able to catch up by wave 4, but we do find that within the IDA eligible population, people with higher incomes may be more able to achieve home ownership. We did look on other subgroup analysis. We didn't find differences, but we find these strong differences on income. So just one concluding thought, two groups did really well, and it might be that the way the IDA was demonstrated here as a short-term program might be hard to make a long-term impact for this program. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to the Q&A later.
Great.
Next slide is just acknowledgement for our funders, so maybe it will be nice to share with we were very fortunate to have a very supportive group of funders to fund this work.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Michal. I know that there are questions coming in, and so I'm going to give Laura a minute to kind of tabulate some of those questions. I wanted to pose a first question briefly to Signa, Mary, and Caroline, and also to Michal. We've asked you to fit a lot into a little bit of time here, so I wonder, in terms of the other kinds of outcomes beyond the ones that you really just shared, were there other kinds of outcomes related to IDA participation that you think are promising, or that are things you just want to mention to the folk groups here? Again, because a lot of times the research that you all do is part of what becomes some of the rationale that practitioners on the phone need to use to make the case about their programs and why they're valuable. So, I might just open that up to say if there are any additional kinds of outcomes you might want to just flag for folks.
Thanks, Ida. This is Caroline. There is a literature that has looked at the effect of IDA participation on civic, psychological, and social outcomes, so self-efficacy. So IDA participation has been found to be associated with improved future orientation, for example. So people feel more confident about their future. One study finds that people are about 30% more likely to feel positive about their future finances as compared to people not participating in the program. That participation increases self-esteem and self-control and improved relationships with family and connections to neighborhoods. So a lot of those studies tend to be a little more descriptive in nature. Some are based on in-depth interviews, but I think they point in a promising direction.
Okay. I'll be just looking on, we have a lot of other outcomes coming up from this long-term evaluation of the American Dream demonstration. If I want to pick just one more outcome with the interest of time, I will maybe pick up the one on education. We look on also educational outcomes, with the experiment, long-term impact on education. We focus on 3 key outcomes: enrollment in school since baseline, whether people earned a degree or certificate since baseline, and whether they increased their educational altogether since their education in baseline. We only had one important statistic to share is that we only had 8% of people who were saving for education. That was reported with the mixed IDA plus the ADD4 survey. That 8% said that that's what they were saving for. And with that in mind, we do find some statistically significant impact on enrollment in education. Treatment group members were 7% more likely to enroll in an educational degree. There was marginally significant impact on degree completion, with 5% more likely to complete a degree. However, for the full sample, it did not translate 10 years later for a high increase in education, like moving from, a bachelor's degree to a master's degree, so something like that, getting a full education. So it seems like it moved them some, but not necessarily took them were able to provide support for entire completion of entire degree. But again, looking on subsample analysis and looking on impact by gender, we find a very strong impact of the program on males on all these outcomes. So there was a strong treatment impact among males. So among males, treatment group members will have strong impact on enrollment, on degree completion, and on increase in educational outcomes. So it seems like the program did quite a lot of performances, good outcomes for males, and I actually will be happy to hear some of the thoughts from practitioners on the call, on the webinar, about what they, how they can explain these findings.
That's going to be one of the shortcomings of a muted conversation is the dialogue. But people are coming in with questions, so thanks for both of that. I do know that we're getting a lot of questions about links to the research. All of that information we'll be able to post after the call for folks. So keep those kinds of questions coming. I'm going to turn it over to Lauren Stebbins to field a couple of the questions that have been coming in online. Lauren.
Hi, everyone. So we have quite a few questions coming in. Excuse me. And we apologize we won't be able to get to all of these. There are so many great ones, but let's try and take a few. The first one we have is someone asking about if you, and I'm assuming this means the researchers, are working with one-stops to ensure that staff are now knowledgeable about asset development resources for their customers.
Okay, this is Signa Mary. I'll take that question. I'm not sure if the AFI Resource Center is currently working with one-stops, but we'll certainly suggest it if they're not. One-stops are a great resource. And then as part of the new evaluation, we will do a full scan of the environment to understand the resources and programs that are available.
Okay, thanks, Signa Mary. Another question we had is if there is any IDA evaluation or research that has attempted to measure participant self-efficacy? If so, have they evaluated the participants' own sense of having more choice and control over their lives?
Yeah, so there certainly has been some work that looks at the overall effect of participation, that it does improve future orientation, self-esteem, self-control. I don't know if McCall has looked at any of these in the long-term outcomes.
We did have all of that in the long-term outcomes, and we'll be finalizing the study on that, so we'll be coming up with results very soon. But we have measured all of that. We look on psychological and future orientation, and preliminary results suggest that not necessarily the IDA itself would lead to increase in the future orientation, but the holding of the assets. So people with greater assets have impact on future orientation, on some of the other psychological outcomes. But we are now wrapping up the study and hopefully have it available in a few months to share.
That's great. Thanks so much, both of you. One other thing, this is Ida back into facilitation mode. I think about the many folks on the call right now, and even though as researchers you've prefaced everything about this is, there are limitations in how generalizable studies are from one program happening in Tulsa in a place where the housing bubble didn't really get as big and therefore didn't burst in the same way, right? And generalizing that across. So I think as people think about how the research, when the similar question comes up when we look at the cost benefit, right, the 3-to-1 idea, I think that as folks that are on the phone need to know that the research is absolutely, we absolutely want an evidence base that helps us understand what works with IDAs and helps us to continue to improve this work. And at the same time, nobody should take as a given that if there are findings that look like things aren't effective, that's not really what that research is saying. It's just saying that in a certain kind of constrained environment, in a certain context, this is what we found, and it leads to additional questions and things like that. So I do want to just open that up actually to the researchers themselves who are committed to building an evidence base, but who also are still quite intrigued and think that IDAs are promising, for a last statement on kind of where the research needs to go and what you might say to a practitioner about how to use this research going forward.
Yeah, this is Signa Mary. I just wanted to add one thing when you were talking about the foreclosure crisis and the housing bubble bursting. And Ida, that's that collaborative research that we did that found that foreclosure rates for IDA homebuyers were 1/2 to 1/3 the rate for other low-income homebuyers in the same communities. So I think that is promising for IDAs, that maybe IDAs are especially important given the current environment.
Right. And I think related to the Tulsa, I need to first start with a disclosure that we, among the group, we are, of the researchers, we, on the team of the ADD4, we not all totally agree on how we interpret and what we find. I believe that's what we have found, that first we need to remember the big picture. IDA participants, in terms of homeownership, did tremendously well. They tripled their homeownership over this, 10 years of the study. They got good mortgages. They have very little rate of foreclosure and delinquency, and they are doing quite well. However, to find an impact, you need to have a control group who doesn't do as well. My personal belief is the control group also, Tulsa is a place that have a lot of asset building other opportunities, and there were other housing opportunities for people to get support. The CFED still give them the individual counseling. We started with a motivated group, so I think what we are seeing is that when the experiment was done and their kind of barrier to get homeownership from CFED was removed, they just went in and got homeownership as well. But it's also say to me say that why we can't necessarily attribute it to IDA, but I think we kind of my hypothesis is we find that asset building work, and I believe the control groups also got explored to other good asset building opportunities and were motivated to get there. And again, that's why it's so important to have another study that now looking on a different environment and looking on programs that run for IDA programs that run for longer, and in more than one place like Tulsa that was really in some ways problematic to just I'm sure the results can be quite different if we're testing them in a different place.
Exactly. Thank you. Fantastic. Great. So Lauren, should we segue over? Or is there I think that's probably the right call at this point in time, is to go ahead and segue over to Rebecca Barger and to Betty Tam from NeighborWorks Umpqua. But go ahead and keep putting all those questions up. We're going to have very much an active website with information around the AFI reauthorization and the AFI funding cut. So to the extent that you need to understand process or what's most helpful or have any kinds of questions, feel free to send them in during the webinar, but also send them to our federal policy team over time. And thanks so much to the federal policy team for taking the time to lay out everything that's happening today. We really appreciate that. So let me turn it over to you, Betty, and kind of move us into your slides on using research as a tool to help shape your IDA program.
Thank you. And I think Rebecca is going to start a little bit.
Sorry. Great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? So next slide, please. My name is Rebecca, and we offer an IDA program called Dream Savers in Oregon. It is a state-funded program through tax credits. We have as was mentioned earlier, we have a really fortunate, supportive state for the IDA program. Our program in particular serves 12 counties in Oregon, which is a very good portion of the state, predominantly rural-based, and so a lot of the people that we're working with are their access to other types of services that are similar are limited, and so we really have developed some good abilities to work with rural communities. Currently, our program has 587 active savers and almost 400 graduates. However, the state itself, with the other IDA programs that are ran through the state, there's collectively over 2,000 graduates, so, and growing. We currently have 5 asset types available, and I have to say I am so excited to hear that the AFI program is looking to expand because it will match what we offer almost exactly, which is wonderful. So we currently have the big 3, the first-time home ownership, small business, startup or expansion, and post-secondary education. But we also have allowed home modifications or repair and assistive technology for employability to be made available. Currently, at our shop, we have 3 different specific funding sources that we use to run our program. The tax credit through the state of Oregon, we have API funds, and then we also receive some private foundation funds. It's worth it to say that we distribute our funds through a network model using, I think we have 10 or 12 partners existing right now and new ones coming on in 2012 to do an amazing job of helping to distribute those funds for us throughout this very rural region. Okay, hold on one quick second here. Hopefully everyone can hear me a little better now. Okay. So Betty's going to go ahead and talk about the next slide.
Move on. Thank you. Yeah, this is Betty. So we are, as Rebecca said, we are a practitioner. We've taken research and evaluation to heart in the way we operate. As a practitioner, we look at our evaluations a different way in order to improve our own program, and not just as the drudgery of a funder needs another report. Bullets 1 through 3 on this slide talk about the evaluation and feedback, and they help guide and develop our growth and set new industry standards. Our data is collected by us and all IDA participants, or providers rather, to evaluate the income, the demographics, and the regional data of the savers that we're serving. It's kind of our internal evaluation, and it's a positive feedback loop. We spend time looking at where the program has been and the trends in other markets. We look at our pool of savers, and we can generate the demographics on that. This helps us determine where we're missing people, either regionally or demographically. It lets us adjust our marketing and help us figure out if the needs were different from what we were able to offer. Thus, it can adapt to meet the growing needs in Oregon. For instance, we learned it isn't early enough to start people saving for college after they turn 18. They need a head start before college. We developed an internal youth IDA program to reach younger people, helping youth save for shorter-term goals, and learn that this actually helps totally change the behavior patterns of our youth. These young people started moving from our youth program into what we call our adult program. It was partly through this program that the state changed its adult IDA program to allow savers to begin at age 12. Another way our program has evolved due to research and evaluations is in the additional of tools to remove barriers to employment. We're helping people save to get the tools that they need in order to either get or create jobs. Rebecca gave me examples on that, but people need a construction truck in order to be a licensed contractor, things like that. We can help in that arena. Bullets 4 and 5 speak to a research study conducted by Portland State University. This data is and was collected from all the participants in the state to evaluate how savers reflect on their experience in the program. This external evaluation compares data between those who complete the program and those who do not, and other long-term savings goals that savers have after program completion. This data is also helpful in appealing to lawmakers, to funders, to community members, and new applicants in the program. This is important to do 2 things. It helps us defend ongoing funding, and again, to inform needed changes. This is where we change to allow for rehab of homes to add accessibility features. There are lots of people who already own a home but can't afford to repair it or modify it. Many, especially in this economy, would like to stay in their home, but as they age, they may need to modify the home to add accessibility features. It's the feedback from clients and these evaluations that help defend this need and change. As we've been able to change the program to meet these new needs, we're now starting to gather data on these new successes. It may be that the newest data will show us additional unmet needs, but to some extent we've gotten some of these big low-hanging fruit on the program improvements of late. And I think Rebecca's going to take the next slide.
Thank you. So while it's fresh on my mind, I did want to report back on some of the results of the evaluation that Portland State University has conducted, which speaks to some of the comments and questions about participant self-efficacy, how are they internalizing the process in this program, and basically, is it working? And so these are just some results that came out of our study so far. 20% of participants reported regularly saving before entering the program, and 49% are saving after the IDA program, and 12 months later, 37% were still saving. So that's a very significant change. Less than 1/3 of participants said that they used the budget prior to enrolling in the program. And by the way, all of this speaks very heavily to the benefit of financial literacy being used. 71% reported regularly budgeting after leaving, and more than half were 12 months later. Additionally, a majority of the people who responded that had not completed the program and did not purchase an asset still reported that they had improved and continued use of budgeting and that they found that tool very helpful. We also have 2/3 of participants reported saving for emergencies, and 1 year later had over half of them had actually established emergency funds, and that was mentioned earlier as well. So that savings habit has transferred over to what else is it that I can be saving for to get me out of a bind. 99% of the participants for the state who reported back had additional savings goals now after completing the program, which included retirement, which I think is amazing. And 46%, to me, this is just a fantastic statistic. 46% reported that they were somewhat satisfied or satisfied with their financial status when they first enrolled. However, 82% reported being satisfied at program completion. So I really feel as though that speaks highly to the knowledge gained, the amount of effort that they see they have to put in to get to this, and that it's not just, you know, some free money program, that they're actually really involved and invested equally into the program. So to get to the slide, using the evaluation, as Betty had mentioned, helped create the opportunity to establish some new asset types. One of the things that the legislature did in 2008 was allowed a modified age of eligibility from 18 down to 12. So we were able to start utilizing this growth in education IDAs towards people who were in junior high school and high school, which gave us a really great opportunity to reach new sectors of the population that we were missing, and helped us connect with a partner who specifically serves youth. And so this was a really great way to provide IDAs to that region. It also gave us the opportunity to use innovative products. The assistive technology savings goal, for example, has been able to help people who have sight impairment, but the only thing standing in their way from acquiring a job is to be able to have perhaps a TTY system. Or we had one person who purchased a computer and had an issue where actually touching the keyboard was very painful for them, and so we helped them acquire a voice-activated typing software to go with their computers so that they could, in fact, work. A lot of people are very motivated to do that, and they just don't have the means, and a lot of other programs that can help with those things had been cut at that time. So we're able to try to fill a gap with the IDA program from other programs that aren't necessarily meeting the needs, and then we're able to leverage the ones that are, which is wonderful. From research has also come new opportunities. I personally, when I'm trying to come up with marketing opportunities, I've used the American Dream demonstration research. I've read a lot of studies and researched some of the AFI findings in order to say who isn't getting access to the IDA program as well as they could be, and what can we do to change that. One of the examples that we're working on this year is identifying in the education sector what types of groups of people tend to not either apply for financial assistance, do not qualify for financial assistance, or have been sort of deterred from applying for financial assistance, including people who are just heavily burdened with student loans and they just don't want to take that on anymore. So we're doing very specific marketing trying to see if we can reach those people. We've also increased our focus on financial literacy, as was mentioned earlier, that while we don't necessarily have the specific results of saying additional money is saved because of increased time in a financial literacy course, we've been able to acknowledge the benefit of having long-term financial literacy, and as Betty had mentioned, starting as early as we can with our youth IDA program, being able to take that on at age 10. Next slide, please. So to recap, what we've really found is that the evaluation internally that we do of our program participants, working with people who have left the program, trying to improve, those kinds of evaluations, as well as the Portland State evaluation that was done, really resonates with policymakers and funders. In fact, one of our more recent funding opportunities was completely based on the results of the research. That was what sold them, and they were really happy to invest. It's easy to use the research and results of that to help grow your program, and it helps us assist other people in their needs. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. So thanks to both Betty and Rebecca, and here's their contact information is up for you. I think that we'll kick this off. We still have a few more minutes for questions, so I'm going to get right into those. But I do think that it's wonderful to be able to look at a program that has an alternative funding source that is already doing many of the things that a reauthorized, an updated AFI would allow us to do nationally. Looking at the ways that the programs have grown as we've learned more about the savings needs and savings habits of low-income populations. So wonderful to hear about this work. And I might ask Lauren if you might want to field a couple of the questions that you're getting in at the moment. If not, I've got a couple myself.
Yep, thanks, Ida. We do have a few questions. The first one is, and this is to Betty specifically, what program are you using to collect the data, and how easy and effective is it?
I think actually Rebecca can probably answer that. We have a data program that the state uses. Why don't you go ahead, Rebecca, with that?
Sure. We use Outcome Tracker to collect all of our data on our participants. And then through a survey that was created by Portland State, we're able to have the graduates and those who don't complete the program provide anonymous data back to the researchers for that portion. But all of our raw data that we collect goes through Outcome Tracker.
And that's used throughout the state with the other IDA participants in the state, Outcome Tracker.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're getting in a bunch more questions, so I'm just fielding these. And we have some research questions mixed in with the ones for our presenters from NeighborWorks UMCLA, so just to let everyone know, we will be able to answer those and post those online. But I just wanted to sift through the ones for NeighborWorks UMCLA. Here's one. what kind of savings goals were younger teens required to set? What could they use the funds for?
We have our own youth IDA program that we call 3A's, and that stands for Arts, Athletics, and Academics. And in this program, the youth down to age 10 could save for, say they want to go to sports camp, or they want to buy a musical instrument, or save to buy a laptop. And this is a savings where they can save up to $300, and it's matched with $600. Is that, Rebecca, you want to add any more detail on that?
Nope, that's correct. Most of our participants who participate in that are also getting 10 sessions of an hour and a half each of financial literacy to go with that. And so we don't restrict them to how many purchases they can make. They can break it up as much as they want. But it does predominantly fit into those three categories. We do allow also entrepreneurship goals, and if they are involved in the foster care system, they can use the funds for independent living costs.
And this, Rebecca has just finished creating a curriculum on the financial fitness training for these youth IDA kids. It's really a lot of fun. And we've found through our own internal evaluation that some of the kids, or many of the kids in the youth IDA program, then segue into the bigger IDA program.
Okay, thanks, guys. We'll just quickly take one more question, and then we'll have to wrap up. And that is, what data points seem most effective when speaking to legislators or potential funders?
Would that be directed towards?
Yeah, go ahead, Rebecca.
Yeah, that's directed towards Rebecca and Betty.
From my experience, people seem to be the most interested in what types of purchases people are making. When we talk about home ownership, they are interested to know that there is not a large quantity of defaults amongst IDA savers. A lot of people are very happy to hear that youth are able to save for college, and then they often ask us if or why we don't have a retirement savings goal. But people seem to be very interested in the individual amounts that people can save and what the total impact on the community is. I like to tell people, you know, all of their savings and all of the match and how that goes back into the communities and is leveraged at that level.
And that's particularly relevant in these very small rural communities that have been very hard hit in this recession, that to know that these dollars are being spent locally.
Great, thank you. And also, I think also that the dollars leverage additional dollars in the community toward this savings end, which is often a very relevant point to make. It's different than many other kinds of programs. I would want to say one more thing in terms of the innovative work in Oregon. It's really exciting to see the different ways that the program can facilitate savings in the ways that you've grown it in Oregon. Coming up this week, later this week, I would just mention briefly that CFED has released all of its updated state policy findings for the past year on key asset building policies, including state support for IDAs. There's going to be a webinar on the 17th looking at state policy progress, and for anybody who wants to participate in that webinar, just go to CFED's website. You'll be able to hear more about the status of state funding for IDAs on that webinar later this week. I think that we need to wrap up now. I want to thank everybody. I know that there are lots of questions that we weren't able to answer, but like I said, we'll have those running tally of those up on the website. We'll be able to answer as many of them as possible while working with the folks that were generous enough to give their time today for this. And then also we'll have a recording later this week as well. And if you have any comments, any feedback for us on how to improve webinars, any ideas for future webinars, please let us know. Otherwise, I'd like to very much thank NeighborWorks, thank Lauren for all of her work setting this up, thank all of our presenters, and thank all of you for taking this time today to tune in and talk about IDA research, policy, and practice. Have a great day, everyone.